the next breath. Macho queens selling war makers toys, raining destruction, good old boys. Deathbringer in Queen George's eyes, read his lips, war maker lies. Religious rites, revenging sword, thou shalt kill in the name of the Lord. The sheep and the cattle can't keep from yelling. Some are more than ready, some aren't willing. Volunteering in what they're not dying for. The young Republican Guard, crying for war. Free speech, as free as it...
And that's John Trudell, Bombs Over Baghdad, one of my favorite songs of all time. Welcome to What's Ailing the World. This is Dr. Rebecca Carley. I'm a medical doctor trained as a surgeon who stopped working in hospitals in the early 1990s after witnessing euthanasia, research fraud, and experimentation on poor people without their knowledge or consent. While contemplating what I would do in the future, I gave birth to my only son, who became brain damaged after receiving the recommended vaccines. I then learned about homeopathy, a word never mentioned in medical school, and reversed his vaccine-induced brain damage. This was the beginning of the development of my Hippocrates protocol, which reverses all vaccine-induced diseases in people and pets. As it turns out, pretty much all diseases in internal medicine are caused by vaccines and other toxins and can be reversed with natural therapies. I do consults for people all over the world, developing individual protocols based solely on history alone. I do not need to see people in person. I do not practice medicine nor give medical advice. Rather, I teach people what I would do if I were them. My websites are Reversing Vaccine Induced, INDUCED, diseases.com and drcarley, CARLEY.com. I've been doing public access television shows followed by internet radio for over 17 years, all the while researching vaccines, which I have determined conclusively are actually biological weapons being used for depopulation. The response of the medical mafia to my work demonstrates how dangerous my information is to the medical mafia and big pharma. Today's show, What's Ailing the World? Our answer is going to be Satanism, mind control, and the evils of medicine. A very deep subject, which many people are afraid to even tip their, toes into. But if you don't know what's going on, we can't do anything to stop it. My special guest is Janice Barcelo, who I consider a sister in healing and getting the word out. She is a transformational teacher, a birth activist and whistleblower, and someone who is concerned with all things that limit or undermine human love. She is an outspoken leader in the movement to expose the violence of hospital birth and to get birth out of the hospitals and back into the home. Through her radio and television shows and in her forthcoming book series, she speaks about the horrors of technologically managed pregnancy and childbirth, as well as the evils of mind control, Satanism, pedophilia, child abuse, pornography, abortion, vaccines, and more. She has spent the last 15 years uncovering the long-term and intergenerational impact of primal trauma on the human body, mind, and spirit. She views the ever-escalating amounts of violence being inflicted on babies and pregnant mothers as systemic, methodical, and purposeful evil. She has lectured extensively on this topic and has created an important curriculum designed to help end the lineage of abuse, violence, and trauma, and restore the humanity's capacity to love. To learn more about her classes and teacher training, please visit her website at birthofanewearth.com or her blog at birthofanewearth.blogspot.com. Her YouTube channel is youtube.com/birthofanewearth. So welcome to the show, Janice. I'm so honored to have you on with me. And let me just also mention, so we don't forget, You also have a link on your blog entry about two books under the Angelic Defenders title about cannibalism, blood drinking, and high adept Satanism. Very heavy stuff by Kerth Barker. Books which I cannot read because my son is living satanic ritual abuse for over a decade now, so I know what's going on. But let me just say to anybody who thinks that this is too scary and you don't want to know about it and you'd rather just, turn on television or go to a movie or whatever, trust me, the abuse that's going on all around us is so dark. And nothing's going to change unless we face what's going on. And as Janice has experienced herself, it starts in the hospital. So take it away, Janice.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm really, really excited to be here with you because you and I have some very potent conversations. There's few people on the planet that I'm aware of that are willing to go as deep as we go. So I'm really glad to be here with you, and I want to say that I'm also really thankful to people like Kerth Barker, who is a victim of satanic ritual abuse and who has done a tremendous amount of work to reclaim his memories, reclaim his mind, and reclaim his soul. And he is working very hard to expose what is happening to children, and what is happening all across the planet, in order that these psychopaths can control us. It's important that we understand. Go ahead.
And let me just say, I am very uplifted. I did watch a couple of his YouTubes, that he has been able to pull himself out of that. So that is very hopeful. In terms of my own son, however, he has to escape his handlers before he can even start doing that. So it's good to know that one can be healed. However, much better to stop it to begin with, because what these monsters are doing, it's just beyond comprehension of people with a conscience. That's one of our biggest problems, in my opinion, is that people with a conscience cannot even conceive that these things are happening right around us. And in fact, most of the leaders of the world are involved in it. Go ahead.
Well, it's true, and I think the best way to sort of corral people into the center of this and to help them get some footing in what we're talking about is to talk about things that they themselves have experienced. So in my work, part of what I do is I talk about what is being done to pregnant women in prenatal care and what is being done to babies and to pregnant mothers during the hospital birth process. And anybody that listens to what I have to share today that has given birth in a hospital will recognize many of the things that I talk about and will begin to be able to think about them differently. I want to share that, of course, I have personal experience giving birth in hospitals. I myself was born in a hospital. The amount of trauma that was inflicted on me when I was born was horrendous. And I was born in 1958, for those who would like to know my age and about when I came into this dimension. My mother was given a drug called scopolamine, and scopolamine is otherwise known as devil's breath. And the reason that they call it devil's breath is because anybody who takes scopolamine becomes willing to do anything you tell them to do. If you tell them to go into their banks and take out all their money and give it to you, they will do that. And they will not remember, which is the benefit of, another benefit of scopolamine is they'll have no memory of what's been done to them when they're on this drug. So the memories I want to stress are always in the body. They are in the cells. They are in the electromagnetic circuitry of our systems. They can play games with our brain and with our nervous system in order to keep the memories from entering into our minds, and they are masters of doing that. However, the memories are always there, and once we begin to desire to seek them out, we can find them through different forms of regression and energy work that allow things to subtly come into the conscious mind. The conscious mind tends to block out the most difficult things that we've experienced, and it does that because if these memories came flooding into your mind, your whole body would re-adrenalize and you could be severely re-traumatized, and the trauma would be compounded. So it's a built-in mechanism that the body and the brain have to prevent system overwhelm and system shutdown. So we want to be aware that the memories need to be brought forth in a way that's gentle for our system, that our system can handle the memories at a pace that's easy for us and in a way that's easy for us. And Kurt Walker has been working with a system called Fabian therapy that's obviously very, very gentle for the survivors of satanic ritual abuse, as it does not force them to go back into the abuse. It uses memory in a very different way to allow the memory system to heal. So there's a lot of great information in Kurt's books. I highly recommend go to my blog at birthofanewearth.blogspot.com or my website birthofanewearth.com, or go to his website at angelicdefenders.theshamecampaign.com to check out Kurt's books, which he is practically giving away. We definitely want to get the information out there.
Right. If I could just interject something, because I want, a lot of this information is new to people, and I want to underline and put in a large font one of the things you said, which is that trauma that's experienced from conception on is stored in the cells. Our cells have cellular memory. And one of the most dramatic areas I learned about this was from someone by the name of Rich Winkle, who I know that you know. This is a man who has studied the consequences of circumcision and how this traumatizes young boys. And so, this is a very important concept for people to realize. Just as I teach people about, detoxing, it's better to avoid the poisons in the first place. Same thing with these situations. There are ways that you can heal yourself, but much better to avoid the situations in the first place. Go ahead.
Well, very, very true. I mean, it's very hard when we're 30, 40, 50 years old and beginning to realize the amount of trauma that we've been exposed to, and we seek to heal it because we have 30, 40, 50 years of neurological repetition that has enforced the trauma, compounded the trauma, forced us to recreate the trauma and relive the trauma, which makes it take more time to move it out. It's way better to help children come into this dimension without trauma, and if we believe that they have had trauma, that we seek to help them heal it right away before the neurological repetition kicks in. And while we're speaking about Rich Winkle and Kurt Walker, I also want to give a mention about Patricia Robinette. These are people who are actively working to get Kurt's books moving forward, and we want to give our thanks to Patricia in a huge way for all the work that she's been doing behind the scenes to help Kurt get the word out and also to stop circumcision in this country and around the world. So there are very good people working very, very hard to make things better for children and for families. I mean, ultimately, if our children are hurt during prenatal care or during the birth process, it will cause our relationships to break down over time. When a father witnesses his partner or his child being abused, and he is unable to step up and protect them because he is in a fascist environment called a hospital, there's severe trauma for the father. And when he can't protect the child, the mother will begin not to feel safe with the father. You understand? The mother will no longer trust that the father can protect and defend her and her children, and the relationship will begin to break down over time. This the dark forces know. They know their objective is to break down human love and to cause dissociation, to make the body inhospitable to the soul, so that the body can be programmed, it can be demonically programmed to actually become a police officer or a military man or an Israeli, jet fighter that's going and blowing up children, Palestinian children, who are playing on the beach.
Or a doctor who continues to do these things in hospitals, or an attorney who continues to sell out his client for cash, or a CPS worker who steals children from good families. The list is endless. Exactly.
Okay.
And oftentimes this realization that the dad is not protecting, it's probably going to be on a subconscious level. It may not even be on a conscious level. But it's going to always be there in the background. Same thing with the male circumcised child. One of the things that Rich talks about is the damage that occurs to male-female relationships, because the same thing holds true for the child. Subconsciously, mom allowed him to be tied down and have his foreskin cut off, oftentimes with no anesthesia, and so he's perceiving the same thing, that mom did not protect him. And as Rich proposes, and it's totally common sense to me, that this may be largely responsible for problems in male-female relationships down the line. Why men become domestic abusers, and there's many factors. It's always the big picture. But I'm just saying these early experiences are definitely involved.
Circumcision is a very extreme primal wound, and I want to stress that it is ritual sexual torture. Okay, these infants, these are newborn infants who are placed inside of a board that has a nice little cutout that fits the little infant body. And you put the little infant into the board, and you strap his legs down, and you strap his arms down, okay, and usually they're covered with a sheet with a hole in it where the penis is, and some nurse or somebody will come in to get the penis erect in order to make the penis easier to work with. And then the psychopath in in a white coat will systematically first crush the glands with an instrument, okay? They have to tear the foreskin off of the glands, literally rip it off from the penis, from the head of the penis, the glands, and then systematically cut it off, which can take 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, of course, depending on the skill of the so-called surgeon. And this they are doing 96% of the time in the United States without any form of anesthetic whatsoever. And anybody that's interested to understand what an infant is going through need simply go to YouTube and watch a video of a circumcision happening and listen to the screams of the infant, the likes of which you will never hear anywhere else in your life unless you are a victim of satanic ritual abuse. That is what this is. At some point during circumcision, the baby will stop crying. This is the point at which disassociation has happened, or dissociation. Okay? This is the point at which the spirit must leave the body. The body goes into parasympathetic shock, which is similar to what happens in the wild when an animal plays dead to save itself. If an animal can't run, if it can't flee, and it can't fight, very often it plays dead, which is what a human body will do as well. The heart rate will slow down, everything, all the blood will come into the heart to try to sustain the life of the baby that is being tortured, whose body cannot process the overwhelm of the abuse, of the betrayal, and of the physical pain of circumcision. Once dissociation has happened, once the body kicks into parasympathetic shock, you'll see the eyes glaze over. There's nobody in there. The soul has gone. All right, it has checked out. That is when programming can begin, and that is what they are seeking. Every time they torture a child, they are seeking to create dissociation so that programming can begin. And every single thing that they are doing during hospital birth, from induction to epidural, to the use of Pitocin, to clamping and cutting the umbilical cord, to putting poison in their baby's eyes, to putting hats, I'll go over this in some detail, but every single thing that they are doing is intended to cause fear, to hurt the baby, and to cause disassociation and a breakdown in bonding and human love. Every single thing. There is no benefit to anything that they are doing. On the contrary, every piece of what they are doing is causing harm, and they know it. And I want to stress, when I say they, I am not talking about every single person that works in a hospital that is involved in doing this evil. Because most of those people are under mind control themselves. All right. To get through medical school, you know,
Yes.
Rebecca.
Yes.
To get through medical school or nursing school, these people are abused, they are sleep deprived, they are forced to engage in some of the most horrifically abusive acts against animals and against babies and against other people, to turn them into psychopaths, to turn them into dissociated entities who are programmed to commit the violence, whose spirits have left their bodies, literally, and a demonic energy can come in to commit the abuse. All right? Most of the people working in hospitals are mind controlled. What I want to stress is the people behind this, the people who create these protocols, the people who mastermind the idea of inducing a birth or cutting a baby out of a mother's body instead of letting it be born, or cutting open a mother's perineum with episiotomy. The psychopathic masterminds behind this are Satanists. They are
Yes.
Luciferians. Okay, they are engaged in purposeful evil with an end goal to control humanity after they kill most of us off, and
Yes.
to control the planet. You want to say something?
Yeah, just that I totally concur with everything you're saying. And when I was in medical school, of course, sleep deprivation is the main way that they keep medical students and especially residents in a zombie-like state where you don't even really participate in reality. It's almost like you're just there. You're told what to do and you do it. But after I caught up on my sleep, and it took me about 5 years before I ever started dreaming again, and looking back on all of it, I can see where it is all satanically programmed. It's designed to do these things that you're discussing, and that's why people have to educate themselves as to what's really going on. Because once you get in there and you get rolled through the door in the wheelchair, whatever, and they put those consent forms in front of you, which nobody reads, they just sign them. They can do anything to you that they want. So much better for you to become aware of what's coming and to find a way to opt out if possible, although they're trying to make it illegal to do home births. Here in North Carolina, where I live, it's actually illegal to do a home birth with a midwife. Some midwives find ways around it. But, this is insane. Pregnancy is not a disease. But the medical mafia has taken control of it for their purposes.
And their purposes are diabolical, so it's very beneficial for us to understand their purposes. One of the things that might be useful is for me to share my personal story around this, so people can begin to understand the impact of what we're doing, just through me and through my personal journey. I want to share that they are manipulating us around our sexuality. And so, similar to my story, which was a story of conception at a drive-in movie theater by two teenagers, 17 and 18 respectively. Teenagers today are also being strongly encouraged, much more so than they were at the time I was conceived, to have sex in very haphazard and basically meaningless ways to separate themselves from their emotional bodies. This is especially true for the boys, who are being encouraged to get their penis in as many vaginas as they possibly can in order to win points in a masculine hierarchy. And so when young boys have sex with girls, it's a conquest very often, and it's part of a homosocial competition that they're having with other boys to prove themselves to be men. This is part of our very sick culture, and our culture is being manipulated and controlled, and our sexuality is being manipulated and controlled to the extent that most children, like myself, are conceived as a side effect of people's fleshy indulgence. There is no conscious participation by the higher planes of existence. There is no parental thought involved in bringing forth life. Generally speaking, I would venture to say at least half of us on this planet were gestated in wombs where we were not wanted, and where our mothers may have contemplated or even attempted abortion. And of course, many abortions, many abortions have happened. If we look at what abortion is, and I want to just go through this very briefly, but to get people hooked into what's actually happening here, because abortion has been normalized. We have a satanic-infested culture that has normalized human sacrifice. Okay? We are killing babies in exchange for a few minutes of fleeting physical gratification, and we are killing them in the most satanic way imaginable. I want to stress that early abortions, up to 12 weeks, the baby is either sucked out of the womb or pulled out limb from limb. I have seen pictures of little hands, little arms, a head. Okay, the baby is ripped, torn apart, torn to shreds. In later stage abortions, like my own abortion, I am a victim of the infertility movement. In the 1980s, I was married to a man who had a low sperm count. I want to stress that he had a low sperm count because he had adoption trauma. He was adopted, and his body had tremendous ambivalence about pregnancy and birth, which could have been healed if we had found therapists that were able and conscious enough. I'm hearing a lot of background noise, Rebecca. I don't know what that is, but that's very distracting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My phone's ringing in another room.
All right, maybe we could mute you while I'm talking.
It stopped. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So instead of my husband and I being able to address his adoption trauma and also my birth trauma, we went through the whole infertility scene, and those drugs apparently create birth defects, of which my son had several, and I was told that he had several birth defects, and I chose to abort my child in the 5th month. So what I didn't know at the time was that they actually burned my baby to death in the womb. They inject a solution into the amniotic sac, which causes the outer layer of the baby's skin to be totally burnt, and the baby also tends to gulp the fluid in, and so his internal organs were also burnt. So the baby was burnt from the inside out, and this all happened inside of me, and I gave birth to a baby that was burnt to death. This is at 5 months, and I did give birth because it was an advanced stage in pregnancy. And if women don't think that this has an impact on them, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, psychically, mentally, on every freaking level, and you don't think it interferes with future births, you're very much mistaken, because every abortion has a very severe impact on every level of our being. They're also doing something called partial birth abortions, and this is very late stage abortions where the baby is nearing full term, 7 months and up. And what they do is they pull the baby out. The baby is usually feet down. So they'll pull one leg out and then another leg out, and then they pull the baby's torso out. And while the head is still, the baby's alive, very much alive and kicking, while the head is still inside the mother's body, they jam a tool into the base of the baby's skull. If the baby is not dead at this point, they shove the tool up into the baby's brains, and they open and close it. It's like a forceps tool that they can open and close so that they squish the baby's brains, and then they stick a vacuum into the hole and suck the baby's brains out of the baby's body. Naturally, the baby will be dead at this point, but I think it's wise to give pause to the extent of the evil that is happening here, and that hundreds of thousands of women in the United States alone are going through every day.
Right. If I could just interject, part of my training in medical school, when I did my OBGYN rotation, I was forced to do a day at an abortion clinic. And I've always been against abortions myself. And this was one of the many traumas that was inflicted on me to have to witness this happening.
Exactly. This is part of the mind control.
Yes.
Not only witness it, but for some are going to have to do it, you know? Mm-hmm. So we want to be aware that this is what we're participating in. We should also be aware that aborted human fetuses are ending up in stamina boosting pills. They're ending up in vaccines. The bodies are being burned to create energy for the hospitals. There's a big story on my blog about Oregon using the aborted babies in their plant to create energy and heat for their hospitals.
Food flavoring as well. Mm-hmm.
Yes, for flavor enhancing research by a company named Synomics, who's been hired by other companies like Lipton Tea and Kraft and Pepsi to do flavor enhancing research. And so any product that comes from these many companies have hired Synomics, have all got the residue of aborted human fetal tissue in it. And Israeli scientists, and I do want to stress the absolute psychopathy of Israel, they are taking the eggs from aborted girl babies and using those eggs to create in vitro children who are created in test tubes. And so the genetics of the child who has been murdered and tortured in this way will be carried on through another child that has been created in a lab. And I want people to see the satanic element of this. To understand Satanists, you have to understand like a little bit of the story about Lucifer or Satan. To understand that there's energies that are in competition with God. Okay? There's a story about Lucifer being an angel who didn't want to be an underling to God. He thought he was as powerful as God. He's very interested to prove that he's as powerful as God. But what he does is he likes to take what God creates, yes, and mutate it. And so we have Luciferians actively engaged, for example, in trying to create life, because that is God's ultimate beauty and ultimate form of love, is bringing forth the beauty of life everywhere we turn. And so they've got to try to take it and manipulate it in some way and turn it into a horror show in the same way they take our air supply and poison it. They take our food supply and genetically alter it and poison it. They take our water supply and put fluoride in it and all kinds of, BP oil and nuclear radiation pouring into the Pacific Ocean. This is the Luciferian satanic mindset. And you can almost see them in the background rubbing their hands together, thinking themselves very clever, about how great they are at destroying life, when the fact is that they are the most impotent creators ever to exist in any universe that is yet to be known, because they create nothing of their own. Nothing. All they do is take already existing systems and destroy them, because they are mutants.
Right, and if I could just interject, I'm not big on the God thing. I just have to say that I think more of a creative force, not a man in the sky. But one of the problems that we have, and many people have asked me, is why would they do this? Because they're poisoning their planet as well. And the only answer I can come up with is because they're psychopaths. It's just like a scorpion. There's a little story about, a scorpion that wants to get a ride across the river, and so some frog comes, and the frog says, yeah, I'll give you a ride as long as you don't sting me. And, of course, the scorpion stings the frog. And the frog asks him before he dies, why did you sting me? And the scorpion said, because that's my nature. And that's a good little, story I like to tell in terms of getting people to understand. This is what these people do. See, they've undergone all the satanic ritual abuse themselves. This is multi-generational in almost all cases. And so that's what they've been programmed to do. They can't help themselves. You have any comments on that?
Yes, I guess there's something else about this that should be stressed, and that ultimately this is a spiritual battle. And the reason the ones that are on the top are doing this is because they are taking great delight in destroying what God creates. These are entities that I don't think God created. I think God's opposite created them. They don't have feelings. Okay, they are completely mutant beings in the sense that they are incapable of feeling. Boy, there goes that rustling. I don't know who's doing that, if it's you or our producer.
Yes, and they're doing this because they have abnormal brains. There have actually been studies on the brains of psychopaths, and it has been found that they have abnormal areas of their brain, especially the temporal lobes and the amygdala, which is highly involved in having emotion and a conscience. And this is actually a genetic defect that they have. And that's why when people talk about, healing with love and all this stuff, you can't heal a psychopath. They can't be healed. They have to be basically eliminated, in my opinion.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'm a little bit on the fence about it just because I want to have hope, but I feel so angry much of the time at what they've been able to do. And I think we're actually talking about two different things. We're talking about humans who have been altered through trauma so severely that the brain is not functioning properly, that their capability to love is non-existent in some. In all of us, the capability to love has been severely undermined and altered. So many of us are having problems accessing, enduring relationships or authentic experiences of human love because we've been so traumatized and so altered. So there's a human aspect to this that we want to acknowledge and have a heart for, and there's an aspect that's not human. Okay?
Right. Those are the ones I'm talking about. Yes.
Yes. And so these are the ones who who were not made with the capacity to feel. They were only made with the capacity to think. And these are the entities that have brought us technology, as we think technology is so great, when in fact a pristine human has capabilities far beyond any technology that will ever be introduced at any time ever. We have capacities that we can't imagine, and if people would like to know more about that, I can't really get into that today, but go read the Ringing Cedars books, go to ringingcedars.com, get the Anastasia books, read them all, and begin to understand what we are capable of in our pristine form, and the potential that we have to actually shift things by bringing forth children, okay, who are not traumatized and who have their capacities intact. In order to do that, we have to begin before conception, okay, to prepare for the arrival of a soul to come through us. We have to conceive our children consciously. We have to call forth a certain kind of soul. You can't just like have sex or have, bring your body together with somebody because you want to get off and accidentally create a life and expect for that spirit to have its pristine capacities intact, because it will not. It needs human consciousness. It needs to make an agreement with the loving force behind creation to say, I want to bring forth a special being. I want to bring forth a being that will contribute to the fulfillment of human love on this planet. I want to bring forth a being that's in the image of the loving creator, not in the image of God's opposite, which is, what's really happening right now because of what we're doing. A lot of the kids that are coming in are not fully human. They're badly damaged.
Yes.
And the dark forces know also how to do this. They know how to have their rituals, right? And how to have their disgusting forms of sex in order to call demons and bring them and give birth to them. And you better believe they're doing this.
Right. And then once the children are born, they're exposed to, the satanic music industry. Certain of the, of course, highly paid artists like Beyonce and Rihanna and Jay-Z, they actually talk about bringing forth altars when they're doing their performances. And you had sent me a link to, I forget the name of the company that's actually coming up with a satanic product line where you can get sneakers with Baphomet and all this other stuff on it. I mean, parents are also just totally, they're too busy to even, get involved with what their children are doing. And so they get involved with all these things, and this just further corrupts their souls.
The music industry is a huge contributor. The clothing industry, television, unbelievable, the demonic programming in children's television. If you sit down, parents, number one, the first thing you want to do is throw the freaking TV out and start spending time with your children and letting them get outside and spend time in the natural world so that they can communicate with the divine mind instead of with the mind of the dark forces, which is what is blasting through your television set and through the radio stations, and of course through MTV and all forms of video and media. So we have to get on this as parents, but we first have to understand what we're up against. And I think it would help to let people know, I decided to begin writing my book. And I was going to write about what I'm about to talk about, which is all of the things that are happening during hospital birth. But something told me to start writing about ultrasound, because I had all this information about ultrasound being linked to autism, ultrasound being linked to intrauterine growth retardation, ultrasound being linked to nervous system problems, to brain damage, to all manner of health problems and speech delays and speech disorders, and there's just unbelievable amounts of data coming forward right now with the damage that's being caused by ultrasound. And I jumped into this topic and I just said, let me let me talk about the history of ultrasound, because I knew that the history of the technology was in war. I knew that they had used it to try to locate submarines, and I know that the Navy is still using it to kill whales. We know that when they blast their sonar into the ocean, sonar is ultrasound, as is radar, that the whales and the dolphins are beaching themselves with brain hemorrhages. They have known since the very beginning of ultrasound in the early 1900s that when fish swim into these frequencies, they are killed instantly. Skin is burnt off instantly. I mean, they're doing the research that they are doing and that they were doing, okay, even in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, was to create lesions in the brain, to create mind control. One of the scientists, the one who's credited with first using ultrasound for medical diagnosis, his name is Carl Dusik. I looked at this man's picture and I said, this man's a Nazi. I just knew it. I don't know if I lived at that time and was involved in with these people. I knew this man was a Nazi, so I started really researching who is this brother. And sure enough, he was a Nazi scientist, a mind control scientist, brought into the United States through Project Paperclip, which was a CIA project that brought these very evil people into this country and bleached their background in order to turn them into scientists in the United States and teachers at universities, so that the United States government could have access to this level of evil mind control research. I mean, this man was involved in something called insulin therapy, where they would deliberately overdose their patients with insulin to purposefully create an insulin-induced coma, at which point the person, of course, dissociates. The levels of intense biological attack that's happening causes the person to dissociate, at which time they can be programmed. And they were also involved, of course, in electroshock therapy. But ultrasound, the reason I'm bringing this up is because ultrasound has been a very, very important part of mind control from the very beginning, from its inception. They have been using it to hurt the brain.
And it's so massively used now. I mean, when I drive to the grocery store, there's a huge billboard where they say, get your 3D ultrasound here. And they show a picture of a baby. And, so mothers are saying, oh, I want a picture of my baby. They're doing it now without even having a medical indication, just to get a picture, having no clue of what you're talking about, the side effects.
Well, yes, and that's why that's indicative of the level of mind control that's going on in our society, that mothers are not asking this question. What is this? What is this stuff? Let me do a little research here. Let me see what the impact of it. I mean, they're 10 weeks pregnant and they've already had 5 freaking ultrasounds. The more that the baby is exposed to, the more damage that is being done. And this damage is insidious because you can actually burn a lesion into the brain with ultrasound and leave the outer layer of the skin intact. So that
let me just interject here, because I actually got my bachelor's degree in diagnostic ultrasound at State University of New York in Brooklyn. And so I studied it for 2 years. And, of course, we were not taught any side effects of ultrasound except for perhaps an increase in temperature of the tissues, whatever, but no major side effects. Then when I became a surgery resident, turns out they were starting to study intraoperative ultrasound, which they were going to use to burn up tumors. And that's when, my brain started asking myself, wait a minute, you can burn up a tumor with ultrasound, but it's safe for babies? Red flag there.
And what else can you burn up? You see, this is the question that we want to ask. And the older that the baby is in the womb, okay, when the baby's skull becomes more developed, 7th month, 8th month, the hotter it gets because the frequencies are blasting off the bone, causing more heat and making more damage possible. I want to stress that every time a mother goes for an ultrasound, she is endangering her baby when they are trying to measure the circumference of the head so that they can tell you your baby's too big. You have to have an induction because, they're making all of this shit up. Okay?
Right.
None of this is valid. Zero of this is valid. But what they're doing is they're constantly focusing those waves at the baby's skull. And the longer time that they're doing that for, the more damage being done to the baby's brain.
Right. And that's very important. Let me interject because when I actually worked after I graduated from this ultrasound program in an OBGYN clinic at Mount Sinai for high-risk ultrasound. And when you scan the baby's head, they have certain criteria that you have to meet to say that you've gotten a correct section of the baby's brain to determine, fetal age. And so this requires constant, over and over again, scanning of the brain. And now they have real-time ultrasound, which is basically just constant emission of ultrasound waves when you're using the transducer.
We want to also be aware of something else, okay? Children today are suffering from many, many forms of immune system and neurological disorders. There's hyperactivity, ADHD, learning disabilities up the gazoo, multiple sclerosis, seizure disorders, autism, you name it, and health issues, asthma, autoimmune problems like lupus. It's just unbelievable what's happening to our children.
Yes, and most of this is from vaccines. Most of this is from vaccines. But as I always say, it's always the big picture. And the more assaults you undergo, the worse the problem's going to get. And many of them actually interact with each other.
That's exactly the point. The interaction is a key to understanding what's happening, that all of this works in unison to destroy a life and to destroy the functioning of the human mind so that this person, when I was a kid, there was no autism. There was nobody in my classes that were autistic, and we didn't have this disease. You ask any teacher that's been in a school with children for the last 30 years, what's happening to the children? That teacher's going to tell you they're severely damaged. There is kids that, they can't even talk. Some of them can't walk. Some of them are dribbling idiots. Some of them can't digest their food. I don't want to say anything bad about autistic children because they're suffering, but these are children that obviously had the potential to come in normal. All right, and then these parents are going to say, it's God's will. This is what the plate that God gave me. Well, don't you dare blame it on God, because this is the opposite of God that's causing this. Every piece of this.
Right, and let me say this is very important. When I was in medical school in the early 80s, we were taught to never vaccinate pregnant women, to never vaccinate children before 6 months of age. Now they're giving vaccines to pregnant women. So they're starting the brain damage there. And then, as you said, let's do another ultrasound. So that's why we're seeing an ever-increasing, spectrum of all kinds of disease. The only place you're going to find a normal child is likely with a chiropractor or maybe a child of an Amish parent. Unfortunately, most of the parents of today have been totally mind-controlled to just do whatever the white coat tells them to do, and we're seeing what the result is.
Yes, we are. And stupid things like the gestational diabetes test, okay, that gives women this drink called glucola, right, that has like paint thinner in it and all kinds of toxic chemicals in the drink itself. So the attack is multifaceted. It's coming from every angle. What passes for prenatal care is nothing more than a form of torture and poisoning for your child and for you as a mother.
Yes.
One of the things several of the things I want to mention about ultrasound. I read repeatedly, there are frequencies. Ultrasound is basically a technology that blasts sound frequencies that adults can't hear. But children, even teenagers, some teenagers have the capacity to hear these frequencies. And babies have the capacity to hear them the strongest when they're surrounded by a bubble of water, as they are in the womb, in the gestational sac. So I've read over and over that to a baby, it's like being in a subway station when a train pulls into the subway station. That's how loud the decibel level is for the baby. And I recently I listened to a radio interview, a podcast, where they were interviewing children, asking the question, do you remember birth? And I heard this little 2.5-year-old child say, I was up in the sky, and there was very scary thunder. The thunder was very, very loud. I was trying to get away from the thunder, and I was very afraid of the thunder. And then I was born, and the thunder went away. And what this child is describing is the continuous fetal heart monitor that is blasting these sound frequencies that is very disturbing and terrifying and torture to a baby.
Just as to the whales and the dolphins, which are also in water.
Right.
Go ahead. Yes.
That's right. Exactly. It's overwhelming.
It is.
It really is. I mean, it's just, the deeper I go, the more sick I get, and I can't even write the damn book because I'm just overwhelmed with what is happening to these children. The other thing I want to stress about this is that, let me encourage people to just Google ultrasound and mind control and be amazed at what comes up. This is all going in the book, but you're going to be amazed at what you can find, the connections with this technology. And also Google ultrasound and infertility, or ultrasound and contraception. Because what they're doing right now is they're blasting the male scrotum just 2 times, 15 minutes each pop. Creates a minimum of 6 months infertility. And in many cases, it's permanent. Okay, so when we are stupid enough to say, I want to find out the sex of my baby, let me go allow them to direct these frequencies out to my baby's developing testes or ovaries. What do we think is going to happen to our children? Do we really imagine that we're not going to have an ever-escalating problem with infertility, which is the goal of these people also? Like I said, depopulation is their primary goal. The last thing they want is for all of us to wake up and to still be here on the planet, because we are going to take these bastards out.
Yes. And let me just say, why do the parents do it? Because they trust the white coats. And that has been my purpose since I realized what was going on, to get people to stop going to these psychopaths. You can't trust them. There is no such thing as informed consent. They're never going to tell you the side effects of anything they do. So you have to use common sense. And just like you said, Janice, go back to nature. Pregnancy is not a disease. Just, let it happen naturally. As you said, prepare for it, use intention and all the rest of it, and just do the right thing. Investigate what's actually being done to all of us, because, of course, the babies are the most sensitive of all.
Indeed. I do have a whole curriculum that I've created to sort of help people understand what it means to prepare for conscious conception, what kind of relationships we should be seeking. Absolutely, we should be healing what's happened to us in the womb if we were conceived haphazardly, if our parents didn't love each other, because very often we repeat the cycle. The cycle becomes intergenerational of traumatizing relationships and conceiving babies haphazardly and gestating them in wombs where they're not wanted and birthing them in trauma. So we have to get serious about healing ourselves before we even get into a relationship, ideally, and start to make children, and then also understand what needs to happen while they're in the womb. The father's role in all of this is hugely important, and we could do an entire show just on that, because our culture has sort of put the father on the periphery and acted like, their role is unimportant, and these goddamn white coats step in and usurp the father's role during the birth process, further disempowering the father and causing a breakdown in the mother's trust of the father's power. So there's so much that we need to become conscious of. But I wonder, is it possible to take just a 2-minute break before I go on?
Well, we don't really have a break.
All right.
If you can go on, that would be good. I mean, there's a lot of things that I could talk about, but you need a break?
I need a quick break. I'll be right back. You talk, Rebecca.
Okay. All right. So
I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, Janice had already talked about what the Israelis are doing in terms of using the eggs of female aborted fetuses to then make in vitro fertilization of those eggs and then grow them in test tubes. I mean, basically, look where we're going here. Imagine, the movie The Matrix is pretty much all true. And if you remember that part where they show the babies growing up in the machine and there's no mother, so there's no bonding at all. And so not only is the cellular trauma being passed on to that generation of test tube babies, but of course the psychopathy that's going to happen, or the emotional disturbance, let's say, from not having a mother to bond with. This is one of the key things that they're using against the children in today. But another thing I wanted to bring up is what they're doing in terms of abducting and murdering children to take their organs. And this is happening especially according to this article on the Republic Broadcasting Network .org, written by Dave Hodges on June 9th, 2014, in regards to the murdering of American children for the purposes of organ theft and shipment to countries such as Israel, Turkey, India, China, etc. So, this is what's going on. I mean, just covering what these psychopaths are doing, it could take weeks constantly just talking about all these different issues. I've been investigating all of this. Okay, I was just talking about the theft of organs from children. I've been investigating all of this for years, and there's so many levels to it. But anyways, go ahead, Janice.
Yeah, I also want to thank Dr. Paul Byrne for this information about the organ donation stuff, because what we're finding is if you are unlucky enough to have a teenage son or a daughter get in a car accident or something and end up in the hands of these hospitals, their organs are very, very desirable to the medical people. And what the medical people will do is they will seek to get a diagnosis of brain death, which, according to Dr. Paul Byrne and others, is a completely fictitious diagnosis, that there is no such thing as brain death. The person is very, very much alive, but they seek this diagnosis so that they can kill this person harvesting their organs. And when most people will sign an organ donation card and think that they are doing a good thing, that their bodies are dead and then their organs are harvested. But the truth is that the organs are harvested while the person is very, very much alive. Organs can only be harvested when the person is alive. And the person is given no anesthesia because they have been, because they've been given a diagnosis of brain death, right, they're going to make the assumption that the person doesn't feel anything. Since their brain is supposedly not working, they must not feel anything. And so if they were to give anesthesia, they would be revealing themselves to be liars. Obviously, the person feels everything because the person is alive while they're literally cleaving open that person's chest and cutting out organs one by one. The last organ that they take out of the person's body is the heart, at which point the person is obviously dead. But this is a form of extreme torture. You could see that the adrenaline levels and the brain activity levels are off the charts when the person is being tortured right before death this way. And they are paralyzed. So given no anesthesia, but paralyzed so that they can't move. And they can't speak. And they can't speak.
And this is another thing I had to witness also when I was on the transplant team, when I was a surgery resident. Yes, and they do bamboozle the parents. They tell them, there's basically no hope. And that's why, I tell people there's no way I would ever sign an organ donation card. Don't do it, people.
Don't do it.
Not to mention, wait, let me mention, not to mention the fact that most of the diseases that occur for which they're transplanting organs are caused by vaccines in the first place.
Look, we are dealing with a very psychopathic population. Some of the Luciferians and Satanists are actually involved in the consumption of human blood and human body parts. I'm quite certain the majority of these organs are not going into other people's bodies to help them live.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unless they're being consumed, because these people think that they gain spiritual power and youth by consuming life force. And Kurt Barker, again, I want to recommend Kurt's books. Go to my website, birthofanewearth.com, or my blog, birthofanewearth.blogspot.com, because he does go into some detail about this aspect of what the Satanists are doing so that we can become aware of this. And something else I want to say about the paralysis and the idea that these people are not feeling pain so that they don't need anesthesia is that they say the same thing about babies. They've been saying this for decades. The medical professionals, quote unquote, have said and drummed into medical students' heads that babies don't feel pain. That baby over there strapped to the board having a part of his penis cut off, he's screaming because he doesn't want to lay down right now. It's not because he's having the most sensitive part of his penis cut off.
Right.
Because he can't feel pain. This is what the medical people are telling us. When my baby, I had a baby that ended up in a neonatal intensive care unit, which was the final blow to my fucking nervous system, I have to say, to watch her be tortured for 2 months and 2 days by these psychopaths, and to have her repeatedly paralyzed, given no anesthesia, while they were doing these very painful protocols like shoving tubes up through her nose or down through her throat, sticking needles into her skull. She had IV lines every freaking place in her body because all of her veins had collapsed, because these people are bloodthirsty.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? I mean, you talked about exsanguination a word that I had never understood until you explained it to me, Rebecca. Maybe you want to share what that is.
Well, it's basically where they deprive you of all your blood, and the way this happens most often in the hospitals is by repeated blood tests. They take tubes of blood every day, and eventually you get to the point where you don't have enough blood, and that's when they say, oh, it's time for a transfusion. And of course, the transfusion is one of the many dangerous procedures they perform because you're going to develop antibodies against that blood. There's no way to have a perfect match unless it's an identical twin. And then those antibodies are going to attack your blood. So that gets you on a never-ending cycle of attack of the blood. You need more transfusions. That's one of the main ways they kill people, especially in hospitals that have, patients transferred from nursing homes. But I also wanted to mention in terms of the drinking of blood and eating of tissues, that's another reason I tell people to never donate your blood for blood transfusions, because just like many of the organs don't end up in other people, I'm sure much of that blood doesn't end up in transfusions either.
Absolutely. One other thing I want to mention about my own personal story here is that my daughter, I was very, very unconscious at the time in terms of my awareness of the level of evil that we're dealing with. I said yes to them doing a tracheotomy on her. She died during their surgery, and I found out years later that they do surgery on infants without anesthesia. So it's amazing that any of the babies live through the unbelievable amounts of torture that they are experiencing in a neonatal intensive care unit, not the least of which is a total separation from an ability to receive loving human touch.
Yes.
And to bond with another human being, because they're on machines. And my baby had tubes everywhere. I couldn't even hold her, I couldn't even hold her.
And you'd mentioned the massive increase in adrenaline or epinephrine when this unbelievable torture is occurring. It was quite amazing to me. I've been studying all these things for years, and I have a medical dictionary that I just happened to be flipping through one day, and I came across the term adrenochrome. And what adrenochrome is oxidized epinephrine. And then I found out subsequently, I think it was through the work of David Icke, that these psychopaths that engage in Satanism, ritual sacrifice, and things of that nature, this is what they're looking for. That is the hormone, the oxidized epinephrine called adrenochrome, that they're gaining their energy from to do what they do.
Kerr talks about it also in his books about the adrenalized blood drinking. So people become addicted to adrenalized blood drinking. And in fact, most of the people that eat meat are addicted to adrenalized blood and flesh because they're eating animals that have been tortured and terrified right before death, which floods the system with these hormones that become addictive. So something we all want to consider are the satanic elements of what we're involved in our own lives that we may have never looked at in quite this way. But the fact is, it's really quite mainstream.
Yes.
Certainly the drinking, the consumption of adrenalized meat is very, very mainstream.
Yes.
And we want to pay attention to that. Okay, so we've got a little bit that I talked about the neonatal intensive care units. I want to compare, like in South Africa, what they're doing is called kangaroo mother care. So if a baby is born prematurely, it is instantly strapped to the mother's body, skin to skin, 24/7. It's with the mother or the father, skin to skin. The reason that they do this is so that the baby has the highest chance of possible survival and bonding, that its temperature will be regulated through its connection to another human body, and obviously the maximum potential for getting well and developing into a full human being, a full-size human being, as opposed to what we're doing in the United States, isolating them in incubators and other things and preventing them from having human touch. This is quite deliberate. Bonding is not allowed to happen in the families, in the satanic families. Children are prevented from breastfeeding most of the time, prevented from making any real bond with their mother, especially. And this makes them much easier to train,
Right.
to become psychopaths.
And this is why we're always led to believe, oh, those people in Africa, they're so, behind the times, and we see more and more that, the missionaries are bringing in, Western technology and building hospitals for these people. And of course, they think they're doing good, but what they're actually doing is the very opposite.
Let's talk about the reality of hospitals. Let me stress that the mind control is so extensive that we've got the majority of the United States population believing that hospitals are the safest place to give birth. The mind control is extremely effective. In reality, American hospitals are some of the most dangerous places to give birth, and babies and mothers are dying in huge numbers in the United States precisely because they have entered hospitals to give birth. The United States now ranks 60th in the world, which means there are 59 other countries doing a better job than we are in terms of keeping mothers alive who are giving birth. I mean, we've got countries like Pakistan doing a better job than we are. Also, we're like 50th in terms of babies, the survival of babies getting past the first day, which means 49 other countries are doing a better job than we are. We are one of only 8 countries where the infant and maternal mortality rates are going up, and more than 50% they have increased over just the last 5 years. So it's extremely dangerous to go into a hospital to give birth. You could end up dead. Your baby could end up dead. It's not a safe thing to do, no matter what. So let me start. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I agree.
Okay. Let me start by explaining why it is so dangerous and what they are doing every step of the process during hospital birth, so that people can identify with this, because a lot of people have gone through it, and they can begin to see the evil aspect of it. While you're in prenatal care, they're going to be doing bunches of ultrasound, right? At some point, they're probably going to say to the mother, your baby's too big, your fluid's too low, I'm forgetting other things that they might, other reasons that they might give. Oh, your placenta is aging. That's another really good one.
Right.
We have to induce you. They're going to make up a reason for this. Just know, people, if you let them induce you, you've got a 75% chance you're going to end up with a C-section. Okay? Having your baby literally cut out of your body. But the induction procedure itself is extremely, extremely violent. So once a mother says okay to this because she believes they're nonsense, she's in for a hell of a ride. Because, first of all, let me say, in a natural birth, the baby is in charge. The baby will signal the mother that it's ready to be born, and the mother's body will begin to produce the hormones of birth, and the birth process will proceed. But this is by the baby's direction. Okay, this is the baby's choice and the baby's knowing about when it's time. that is so important in a natural birth and for the baby to be born feeling like it has control over its destiny. 1/3 of babies are denied this. Okay, 1/3 of babies are induced in the United States. 1/3 of babies have their birth imprints hijacked and stolen in an extremely violent way. So what they're going to do is they're going to use drugs. There's 2 main drugs that they're going to use in the United States to force your baby out of the womb prematurely. Okay? Before your baby's fully developed, before your baby's ready, which means premature. The drugs are called Cytotec or misoprostol, however you pronounce it. And the other one is called Pitocin. In the UK, I think it's called Synctocin. Let me talk about them separately. Cytotec is an ulcer drug. It is being used in hospitals to do something called ripen the cervix or to create a miscarriage. Basically to have the baby fall out of the mother's body. It is a drug that is being used not only off-label, because it specifically says it should not be used on pregnant women. It is being used against the label. Every day in American hospitals, women are getting uterine ruptures, amniotic fluid embolisms, and they're dying. And they're dying in large numbers. Whenever you read a story about a mother who gives birth to a baby and within an hour or a couple of hours is dead, ask the question, was she given Cytotec? Because that is one of the major culprits of killing women and babies. If the uterus ruptures, what do you think is going to happen to your baby?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Cytotec creates really intense contractions. The same thing that Pitocin does. Pitocin is a synthetic oxytocin. It's chemicals. It's poison. Now, natural oxytocin is the hormone of human love. It is the hormone of human bonding. It is the hormone of well-being. It is the hormone that allows for a mother and baby to bond. It is the hormone that allows for the birth to feel ecstatic, for the neurobiology of love to activate at birth. It is the hormone that allows for the letdown of colostrum, right, so that a mother can feed her baby. Now, here is how insidious Pitocin is. When you give a laboring mother Pitocin, it tricks her body so that her body won't produce the real thing. And if the real thing is not happening, then human love is not happening, or will be severely, severely undermined. And not only that, but the production of breast milk. Okay, Pitocin is also very important for normal contractions. Okay? In a normal birth, in a natural birth that's unhindered by any form of technology, we want to be away from all forms of technology. In a natural birth, a contraction will come. It's usually around a minute long. It'll peak for it'll build, it'll peak for like 20 seconds, then it'll level off, and then it'll stop, and the body will rest. This is nature's order, right? Another one will come, it'll build, it'll peak, it'll come down, the body will rest. There is no such thing with Pitocin contractions because they are intended to create pain for the mother and the baby, and it's intense. The Pitocin contractions come one on top of another, on top of another, so that there is no rest. And so that the uterus is turned into a trash compactor instead of a birth portal. All right, and the mother is going to be sitting there going, oh my God, I can't take it. begging for an epidural, begging for some form of pain relief, because everything that's happening to her is not natural and creating immense pain. And I want to stress that if there's pain for the mother, it's worse for the baby, because these contractions are crushing your baby and they are causing fetal distress. Now these dark ones know that Pitocin causes fetal distress. In fact, that's part of why they're using it. Doctors have been known to do a protocol called PIT to distress, which is an order given to nurses that basically says to the nurses, give this woman an overdose of Pitocin, very high levels of Pitocin, so that we can deliberately distress the baby and move more quickly to a C-section. And nurses are blogging about it. And this is how we know what's going on. And this way a doctor can get to his golf game or wherever it is that he's got to go, so that he doesn't have to be bothered hanging out waiting for this birth process to happen naturally. That's the last thing, that we really want to have happen if we're in a hospital. At least that's the last thing they want to have happen. So I want to stress that Pitocin is causing pain. They know it's causing distress in babies. Because of the distress, they're going to do what's called fetal heart monitoring, usually continuous fetal heart monitoring. And with continuous fetal heart monitoring, sometimes it's internal fetal heart monitoring. And what's involved here is that they will take a probe. They will put their arms, their hands, their fists inside of the vagina of a laboring mother and screw this probe into the baby's skull.
Yes.
Yes. So every time there's a contraction, that probe will pull and tug at the baby's skull, creating further immense pain for the baby. And of course, babies who have this don't like to have their heads touched, and they have a variety of other problems. Deep wounds on their head, not the least of which is a deep wound on their heads, but deep wounds to their spiritual capacities as well, because that soft spot in the baby's skull is otherwise where the baby would be receiving a download of information as it makes its transition from the spiritual realm into the physical realm. And instead, it's going to be receiving immense pain. This is all purposeful. This is all methodical. This is all evil. What mind would think to screw something into the baby's skull? What kind of psychopath would have that thought? Think about this, folks. What kind of psychopath would encourage you to force your baby out of the womb before it's ready?
Well, and I have to say, I'm glad the nurses are blogging about this, but they're still following orders. I wasn't aware of that, but I will say that when I have my son Joey, you're basically describing exactly what happened. Of course, I was unconscious at that time as well. I was given Pitocin and told I needed, to have, my labor wasn't, I forget the term they used, it wasn't, working well enough, whatever word they used. So they put me on Pitocin. I was in labor for about 36 hours. It was absolute hell. And just like you said, I was begging the doctor, I can't take it anymore. And eventually he did do a C-section. And, of course, I didn't realize all the ramifications of any of these things until years later. But I experienced this myself. And it's just unbelievable. And having a C-section, there are problems with the mother down the line from that as well. Because you're not supposed to have your uterus cut open. That's not how the whole birth process was designed. So it's very disturbing to me that the nurses are following these orders. But, of course, that's what the nurses are supposed to do. And it is truly amazing how all of these procedures have been put in place. Nobody's questioning these things except for, people like us. The people in the hospital, they just do what they're told. It's part of the standard of practice. And I'll be talking about the standard of practice on next week's show. How the doctors are basically being forced now to do insane things, to keep their license or to get insurance coverage, and they're going along with it. It's disgusting.
Yeah, it is disgusting, and again, people are doing it because they're mind controlled or they're afraid to lose their job or whatever. Obviously, the nurses are upset about it, or they wouldn't be blogging about it. But we should know that it is happening, and that Pitocin is a real problem. And once you let them induce you or give you Pitocin, it's all going to be downhill. I'm telling you, folks, it's not a good thing. And if they can't get the Pitocin in you while you're laboring, they're going to give it to you when what they call the third stage of labor, after the baby comes out, and you're giving birth to the placenta, and that's because they want to get that Pitocin into you to prevent bonding from happening. That's a key.
Right, and prevent the breastfeeding. And that's
Yeah.
another thing I experienced. I was bound and determined to breastfeed. I ended up being in the hospital for 6 days after my C-section because I had a number of problems. And if it weren't for one nurse who was, right there by my side and was coaching me and teaching me, and I told her there's no way I'm not going to breastfeed. And she kept with me, and eventually I was able to breastfeed. But I know that what happens with most mothers is they just give up, and they say, oh, it's not working, I'm not producing milk enough, and now we know why. And so, yeah, just give them some formula.
Yep. Yeah. There's so much I could say about the formula too, but let's do this birth stuff. Okay, so now we got the mother screaming, right, begging for the epidural, and so in comes the epidural. Epidural is an anesthesia that they inject directly into the cerebral spinal fluid of the mother, which is absolute also what they're doing in trauma-based mind control. If you could see what these doctors have been up to for the last 100 years almost, you would see that this is an exact replication of what they're doing during trauma-based mind control. So this anesthesia is ideally intended to numb the mother, the bottom half of the mother's body. Epidural is another drug that's going to trick the mother's brain. Okay, in a natural birth, the brain will be producing opiates, all these feel-good hormones, all right, so that the birth process is not only tolerable, but pleasurable. And this is God's program. I know that most people believe that the demon of the Bible is God, but that is not God. The real God has not, if we look anywhere in nature, we do not see animals suffering in childbirth. We see them giving birth in the natural world, perfectly fine, no suffering. Look at your cat. Okay, watch how your cat gives birth. And notice, right, there's no screams or cries in pain. It just happens. And that's because there are natural opiates that make it pleasurable, that make it feel good. And this is how it should be. That's the program of life, is that life, bringing forth life, should feel good, but not in the program of God's opposite. God's opposite wants it to hurt, and we are marching into their territory and making it hurt. So in comes the epidural. Now the body's not going to be producing the natural opiates of birth. But mother is not going to be feeling anything, right? Because she's got the epidural, so no problem, right? Everything's good. There's no pain for the mother. But for the baby, there's more pain. Because that baby needs the opiates too, in order to make the birth okay for the baby, in order to make the birth feel good, and in order for that baby's brain to fully activate, to be able to produce its own opiates and its own oxytocin. All the natural hormones of birth are necessary for the activation of the baby's brain, and they're all going to be missing. and it's going to hurt the baby. All right. The other thing that's really going to hurt the baby is the fact that he or she is going to be separated from its mother, because the mother can't feel her baby. The mother can't feel her own body. Okay, this mother, once she has the epidural, can't even roll over on her own. She has to have somebody roll her over from side to side. She can't stand up and squat or spiral her body or lift a leg up on the bed or do anything at all to help her baby get born. She is completely dissociated, basically, from her body and her baby, which means the baby is on its own, getting born against unbelievable odds, with a thing stuck in its skull, Pitocin contraction, cytotech, right, being forced out of the womb before it's ready, and now the epidural, and it's totally separated from its mother and doing everything on its own, and the mother's on her back. As soon as the mother gets on her back, her pelvis narrows, the baby's blood supply, oxygen supply, okay, is diminished greatly as soon as the mother lays down. So now we're talking hypoxia, right? We're talking about further brain damage, all because of these interventions. And of course, a huge number of these births are going to end up in a cesarean section. We have a minimum of 1/3 of babies being literally cut out of the womb through a cesarean section. And in many New York hospitals, it's 1 in 2. In Brazilian hospitals, it's 90% are being born through cesarean section. And let me say, folks, a baby being torn violently out of its mother's body that way has profound spiritual, psychological, emotional, and psychic effect on that child. It has had its birth hijacked. It has had dominion over its own experience completely stolen. And this baby knows that it's being attacked by forces that are not of love. Whether we think a baby knows or not doesn't matter. The truth is the truth, and the baby knows that it is being purposefully and violently attacked by the dark forces. And it will have these memories repressed. It will think that there's a God that is out to get it. Okay, it will believe that the energy that it feels its whole life, that he or she thinks wants to hurt it, it will believe that that is God. But it is God's opposite. And it is working very strongly through hospital birth and programming us in a very dark way. I want to stress for the mothers that the C-section will almost ensure that you will experience postpartum depression. In fact, all of these drugs, because they're going to undermine the natural hormones of birth, which would otherwise create the neurobiology of love at birth, will pretty much ensure postpartum depression. And 1 in 10 women not only has postpartum depression, but post-traumatic stress syndrome after birth. In C-sections, they're going to take your uterus out of your body and put it on top of your stomach to sew it up. I've got pictures of this. If you don't think this is going to cause you intense pain, you're very wrong. And if you don't realize that this is going to cause months of healing just on the physical level for you to get well, then you don't understand what's going on. And we don't understand that even though the baby has come out, okay, what's come out is the flesh. We think that that baby has thrived. But what we've given birth to is the flesh only. Because that baby's spirit has been under attack in a grand scale, and disassociation is likely to have happened before this baby has even made its way into the physical plane. Okay,
And not only that, the torment continues. The first thing they do after the baby's delivered is take the baby away from the mother, put it under the hot lights, do the cleaning and all the other things they do. Stick, like you said, toxic poison into the eyes, etc., etc. And then, of course, there's also the clamping of the umbilical cord, which is insane.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Let's talk about that one by one, okay? Because when the baby comes out, the first thing they're going to do is clamp the umbilical cord. Now, I want to stress that there's a huge amount of blood that's in the placenta that needs to come to the baby. That blood is the baby's oxygen supply, and they're cutting the baby off from its oxygen supply. It's actually 1/3 of the baby's blood supply. So when they clamp the cord, immediately after birth, they're causing the baby to be born in a hemorrhage state, and they're cutting off the baby's oxygen, further creating brain damage. The baby is not breathing while it's in the womb, so it's receiving all of its oxygen through the blood. Okay? When the cord is wrapped around the baby's neck, it's really not a problem, even though they make it a problem. It's only a problem if that cord is compressed and cutting off the blood supply. So I want to stress that if your baby's cord's wrapped around your neck, don't worry about it so much, okay, because the baby's not breathing. As long as the baby's getting all of its blood, that's what's important, okay? If that cord is compressed, now it's an issue. But if it's not compressed and you see that cord pulsing and there's blood coming through it, we're good. Leave the baby alone, leave the cord alone, even if it's wrapped around the neck. It's okay. Okay? So there's also stem cells in that blood supply that are necessary for your baby to develop a healthy immune system and for your baby to develop healthy lungs and for the full activation of your baby's brain. So now what they're going to do is they're going to steal that baby's blood. They're going to cut the baby off from it. They're going to invite the father to do it, which is one of the most wicked and evil things that they could do, because now they're asking the father to initiate their child into the satanic cult by committing a horrendous act of violence against his own child, by cutting off his child from his child's oxygen supply, from his child's stem cells, from his child's blood supply, which is going to end this kid in the NICU, in the neonatal intensive care unit, okay, and cutting off his child from its placenta. Now, this is a very important thing. Indigenous cultures understand that the placenta, they believe it's like a guardian angel or like a spiritual twin for the baby. The placenta is there solely to protect the baby and to siphon off as many toxins as it can so that they don't reach the baby or make the baby sick. Right? The placenta will break down its own body in order to make sure that the baby is nourished. In what's called a lotus birth, which are people who are getting conscious of what I'm talking about and leaving the baby attached to the umbilical cord and the placenta until it falls off naturally, 2, 3, 5, 7, however many days it takes. Okay? 5 days after birth, that placenta is alive and still pulsing when the baby is nursing. Okay, the placenta is still responding to the baby's needs getting met and to the baby being nourished. And in indigenous cultures like Bali, fathers have very strict protocols that they must follow to protect their baby's placenta, because they know if the wrong people get their hands on it, that the baby can be negatively influenced by dark spirits throughout its life. Some cultures bury the placenta so that the child will have somewhere on the earth where it can go to reconnect with the divine mind. And that is the place where the placenta is buried. So there's a deep spiritual thing happening between the baby and the placenta. And that same recording where I heard the baby, the 2.5-year-old, talking about hearing thunder, okay, the next child, who was 4, was talking about how sad it was when her father cut her cord. How sad she felt.
Wow.
And we had better listen up, because we're cutting our children off not just from physical blood, stem cells, oxygen, but from a profound spiritual bond that they have with their placenta. And then we're in a culture, which is again satanic infested, encouraging mothers to consume their baby's placenta, to consume their baby's life force. And mothers are proudly doing this and talking about it all over the internet, having their placenta cooked and encapsulated.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, it's a huge movement. Look up the encapsulation of the placenta. Look up eating placentas. They're trying to make it illegal in the UK now because it's become a real big fad. But let me stress, the placenta has enormous medicinal value for the mother. Okay? If the mother is hemorrhaging and the placenta has come out, if you can give the mother a piece of the placenta to suck on, the hemorrhage will stop. Okay, if the mother is experiencing postpartum depression, she's experiencing it precisely because of birth trauma and because of a breakdown in bonding with her baby, which I'll talk about in a minute. If she consumes the placenta, the postpartum depression will go away. So the placenta does have medicinal value. I don't want to undermine that. In instances, it can be very helpful to the mother. But the mother would be wise to acknowledge that this is her baby's life force that she is consuming, and her baby would probably want to help her and be happy to help her. But let's acknowledge what we're doing, at the very least, to give thanks to our children. And the baby's also going to leave stem cells in the mother's body. After the baby is born, those stem cells will be in the mother's body for the rest of her life. And if the mother has a disease, those baby stem cells are going to go and try to fight the disease of the mother and to heal her organs. Okay, so our children are doing an enormous service to us. Enormous, and we don't realize it. Just as the placenta is doing an enormous service to the baby. Even though the mother helps to build the placenta, it belongs to the baby.
And that's why they're harvesting the stem cells now. And they even have stem cell blood banks where you can buy the stem cell blood, the cord blood that's been stolen from the baby. And, of course, they're using that for all kinds of experiments as well.
Yes, and also all kinds of consumption during rituals, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes. So we want to be aware that we don't want anybody to get their hands on our baby's cord blood or their placenta. If you try to get them out of the hospital, the baby's placenta out of the hospital, you're going to be met with some resistance, but you need to do it. You need to avoid the hospital, period. That's my thought. Okay, some other things that we're going to do. I know we're almost out of time, and I really want people to get the extent of this. Okay, they're going to take the baby away from the mother absolutely within the first hour. This is mandatory in hospitals. And it's absolutely mandatory that they should not do it. Okay? The bonding should not be interrupted at all for the first hour at least. And ideally for at least 3 to 5 hours. That mother and baby should be skin to skin, or the baby and the father should be skin to skin if the mother is unconscious for any reason or cannot be with the baby. Bonding should never be interrupted because there is a cocktail of chemicals that will happen only once in this child's life, and that's going to happen at birth. And those chemicals, those hormones, are what are going to bond that family and create the neurobiology of love that can keep the family together forever. Birth should be a major, big-time love event. I mean, huge love. Neurochemicals of love flooding the bodies. of mother, father, baby, and any sisters or brothers who might be present. Okay, everybody will be feeling it in a natural birth. And that's how it's supposed to be, so that the glue of love will keep that family together, and that memory of birth will bond them forever. Or the opposite. If there's trauma, we can imagine that that relationship is going to end up being toast at some point. Okay, if there's trauma, there's going to be a breakdown in the mother-child bond that will likely last throughout life, unless some healing happens. Okay? It is huge that they're taking the baby from the mother, but in addition to that, and also this is the cause of postpartum depression, if your baby is not with you, mom, skin to skin, okay, your body has no evolutionary context in which to understand why, after the process of birth, the baby is not on top of your body with you. Okay, it does not compute. So the body says, my baby must be dead. And it will produce the hormones of grief, the neurobiology of grief, the neurobiology of mourning. And this is called postpartum depression. And this is a result of all of our hormones being so interfered with, and also the separation between a mother and a baby after birth. And it's all medically caused. It's all iatrogenically induced. And it is methodical, purposeful, deliberate, and evil. They're going to take your baby. They're going to put burning poison in your baby's eyes. And do you know why they're going to do that? They're going to tell you it's so that your baby doesn't go blind. But, hospitals are maybe 100 years on the scene. For millennia, we've been giving birth, and babies didn't go blind, and we have to be insane to believe what they say, but we do because we are insane. We are mind-controlled, and we let them put the poison in our baby's eyes. But here's the thing. Eye contact is a primary means to activate the brain to produce the chemicals of love and human bonding. Looking in someone's eyes will create the neurobiology of love when love is present. When love is supposed to be present at birth, or if you're with somebody that you really love and that loves you, you look in their eyes, you will feel it. You will feel the neurochemicals come into your body and experience human love. So the eye contact is of primary importance. When your baby comes out, Dad, okay, you want to be, either you or your partner, you want to be looking in your baby's eyes. You don't want your baby's eyes to be looking at anybody else except you. And you certainly don't want anybody to put poison in your baby's eyes and burn your baby's eyes and interfere with your baby seeing clearly. And to know there's a reason behind it.
Right, and I just want to also mention, of course, as we talk about all these things, and you just see how one travesty leads to the next, once the mother's diagnosed with postpartum depression, they're going to put her on psych drugs. And then that's going to further interfere with the bonding, with all the side effects of psych drugs, not to mention the mother not being able to, breastfeed if she's taking all these toxic poisons, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many levels to this. I think your book is probably going to be as huge as my vaccine book. I mean, this is massive.
I think it's actually several books that want to come through, because I can't even believe all this stuff I'm finding on ultrasound. It's like a book in itself. But let me quickly go through the rest. So they're also going to vaccinate your baby. In New York State, for example, the hepatitis B vaccine is mandatory, even though hepatitis B is a venereal disease, and I don't know any babies that are sharing needles or having sex unless they're born into a satanic family. So they're not likely to get hepatitis B, but they are likely to get autoimmune diseases and multiple sclerosis and a variety of other things like liver disease if they get the hepatitis B vaccine, because it's causing all kinds of problems, and it's mandatory, and they can microchip babies with these vaccines. And they are injecting them with so many neurotoxins that will alter the brain Okay, these are neurotoxic chemicals that are being injected into babies that will make the body inhospitable to the soul. Rudolf Steiner was one of the first people to recognize that that's what they were doing with vaccines, to make the body inhospitable to the soul. All right, they're going to give a vitamin K shot also. Your baby's body cannot process synthetic chemicals that masquerade as vitamin K. Okay, it's neurotoxic stuff. If you have a vitamin K question, Mom, eat a bunch of leafy green vegetables right before the baby gets born, plenty of them that contain bunches of vitamin K, and breastfeed your baby, and no worries. Okay, let's not interfere with God's program. They're also going to put a hat on your baby. Okay, the reason they're doing this is because your baby's head has a distinct smell. And that smell is because it's emitting pheromones that also activate the neurobiology of love. And we can't have that happening if we want to destroy the human race. So we're going to put a hat that smells like chemicals and has been washed in chemicals or is filled with flame retardants. We're going to put that on the baby's head. And we're going to know that there's species out there that actually reject their babies if the scent is off. For example, birds. Okay, so now the mother can't smell her baby. Her baby can't see her. The smell's interrupted, the eye's interrupted. They're going to swaddle the baby and prevent skin to skin. So if the baby can't feel its mother, it's going to be wrapped so tight in a toxic blanket filled with chemicals that it's going to go into parasympathetic shock. It's going to dissociate. That's what swaddling does. Again, you can look at the research that's involved with the same man, Niels Bergman, who's doing kangaroo mother care. He'll talk to you all about the long-term impact of swaddling and what's really happening in the baby's brain when the baby is swaddled. It is not resting. It has extremely high levels of cortisol. The baby is in shock. And it is playing dead with the swaddling, and parents are being encouraged to swaddle even after they go home. So now they're preventing the skin to skin, they're preventing the smell, they're preventing the eye contact, they're preventing the baby from even taking a breath on its own naturally and forcing it to gasp in desperation for its life when they take its blood. And they take it away from its mother and do all kinds of painful, mean things, like inject it with needles and cut off sensitive parts of its penis. People, there's more. I didn't even get to talk about episiotomy or any, there's more to talk about, but I know we got 2 minutes. I want people to see that every single thing I've talked about, and even what I haven't had a chance to talk about, is going to destroy the bond, or it's seeking to destroy it. That is the intention. And it's seeking to inflict brain damage and to inflict harm on the baby and to prevent the baby from having its soul fully incarnate into its body. This, my friends, is the goal of technology, of all technical interference in the prenatal process and in the birth process. If you'd like more information, please visit my website at birthofanewearth.com or my blog at birthofanewearth.blogspot.com. Watch my YouTube videos. I've done mega interviews about these topics. Okay, it's all over my website too. Listen and learn and stop and protect your babies and protect your families. Don't allow these people to get their hands. Don't allow these people to get their hands on you or your baby.
And if you know of a mother considering pregnancy or pregnant, you must share this information with them. This archive of this show should be up within the next few days. I'll put it up on my site once I get it from our station manager. And all I can say is you've blown my mind, Janice. We've talked so many times, but just the swaddling thing, I had no clue. I mean, I knew that when now they're telling mothers, oh, you have to put your child on its back. It supposedly prevents SIDS, which of course is caused by vaccines in the first place. So
Yeah.
once again, another intervention. The baby can't get control of its neck muscles as it does when you put the baby on its stomach. I mean, there's so many layers. It's just, it's frightening.
It also creates severe hip damage. The more a baby's swaddled, the less likely its hips are going to develop properly.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so much to the swaddling thing alone. Each piece of this is very, very evil. And it has multiple levels. So that's why I think there's multiple books that want to come through.
No question.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me on. Also, for people that are thinking of having children, please check out my curriculum and my teacher training, because this is the best way to prepare and to avoid all of these things, to protect yourself, protect your family, protect your children, and to ideally combat these demons by bringing children in the most gentle and loving way. There is a method by which we can do this, and I can tell you what that is, and I'd like to. So please look at my curriculum and my teacher training on my website, birthofanywords.com. Thank you.
And I couldn't recommend it more highly. Okay, thank you, Janice, for an excellent show. And I'll be back next week with Ingrid Castle of VacLib to talk about how the standard of practices are now forcing doctors to do even more evil things. Okay, we'll talk next week with Ingrid, and thanks again, Janice. Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye-bye.